Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the book sacrifice tag. This tag was created by Break Even Books, and I saw it originally on Scientist Reading World, and I'll leave links to both videos in the show notes down below. So let's get going. So there are only 4 prompts to this tag, so I'm going to be doing, except for one of the prompts, multiple books. And this is basically about getting rid of books. So, prompt number 1, an overhyped book. Situation: you're in a store when the zombie apocalypse hits. The military informs everyone that overhyped books are the zombies' only weakness. What book that everyone else says is amazing but you disliked do you start chucking at the zombies? I've got 2 for this prompt. First up is the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. For most readers of my generation, the Harry Potter series formed a bedrock of the development of our love for reading. But I didn't experience that. I came to Harry Potter later, and I absolutely hated it, or what I read of it. The writing is just terrible, just absolutely terrible. And now, had I read it when I was younger, when they first came out, I'd have been in my early teens at that point, I might have liked it. Although, given my later sort of revisits of books that I read and loved when I was a child or a teen, I probably would still not like this at all. It's bad. So you're probably asking yourself, well, if that's the case, why do I have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and I also have Chamber of Secrets too? Well, there was a period a few years ago when I decided when I wanted to focus my library, my personal collection on science fiction and fantasy, that I really should have those works that are likely to be canonical, as much as science fiction and fantasy has a canon. And like it or not, Harry Potter will be in that canon, whether it's, even though its literary merits are nil, and of course, J.K. Rowling has become a beacon of controversy the past few years, but Harry Potter did get a generation of kids reading. But I still would be chucking these books at the zombies. Although perhaps a more effective book and book series to be chucking at zombies would be the books in the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, because, well, these are chunky books. And all of the books in the Stormlight Archive will be chunky, or are and will be. And yeah, so definitely would be quite effective. I've never gotten on with Brandon Sanderson. I know he is incredibly popular in science fiction and fantasy circles, but I've never seen the appeal of his work. I've tried several times and it's just no. Too bloated for me. So, moving on to prompt number 2. A sequel. Situation: torrential downpour. What sequel are you willing to use as an umbrella to protect yourself? As much as books can be used as umbrellas, but I've got 3 books for this prompt. First up is Priest of Gallows by Peter Mclean. This is the 3rd book in the War for the Rose Throne series. And as much as I enjoyed Priest of Bones and Priest of Lies, I really did not like this book. Yeah, it's just the worst part of Priest of Lies is basically the entirety of this book. It's no. And I was looking so forward to it too, and I think my reaction to this, to Priest of Gallows, sort of made me realize that I haven't really been getting on with science fiction and fantasy lately. At least not manga. But anyway. So yeah, I definitely use that as an umbrella. Next up is A Desolation Called Peace by Arcady Martine. This is the second book in what I'm assuming is a duology with A Memory Called Empire. And I didn't particularly like A Memory Called Empire, but what I read of A Desolation Called Peace is it's significantly worse. And of course, the third book that I would be using as an umbrella would be The Hanged Man by Katie Edwards. This is the second volume in the tarot sequence. And basically, I have a complicated relationship with this series, I think. When it first came out, when the first book in the series, The Last Sun, came out a few years ago, I rather liked it. And I was looking forward to the rest of the series. I did have some issues with it. I thought the characterization, well, the setup I thought was interesting. I thought the characters were the weakest part. The main protagonist is bad. His sort of the deuteragonist sidekick is. I don't see the appeal of him, and it's just like the cast of characters I think are by far the weakest part of the book. And while I enjoyed my first reading of The Last Sun, when I reread it in preparation for The Hanged Man, I liked it significantly less. And I hated The Hanged Man. I couldn't get into it. The worst parts of The Last Sun, I think, are heightened in this book. Some things were corrected, but a lot of the bad stuff is sort of like Edwards' flaws as a writer sort of get magnified in this book, and it just, yeah. And then, as a glutton for punishment, I decided I wanted to pick up the third book, The Hourglass Throne, which came out this year, to complete the trilogy. But and so to do that, I was going to kind of reread The Last Sun and The Hanged Man, and I just could not get into The Last Sun. It just is like unreadable. It had become unreadable for me. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be using The Hanged Man as an umbrella. Okay, moving on to prompt number 3. A classic situation. You're in English class and your professor raves about a classic that transcends time. If given the opportunity to travel back in time, which classic would you try to stop from ever being published? For this, I'm probably going to go with Ulysses by James Joyce. Although you could also probably do Finnegan's Wake. I like The Blenders by James Joyce, but I've tried Ulysses once or twice, and I thought it was just bad. Just bad. Moving on to the final prompt, a least favorite book. Situation. Apparently global warming equals suddenly frozen wasteland. Your only hope of survival for warmth is to burn a book. Which book will you not regret lighting up? I've got 4 for this one. First up on the pyre is The Traitor Beru Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. This book was rather popular a few years ago, and I think the entire series was quite popular, but I hated it. I absolutely hated it. It just, the sort of, I didn't buy the main character being who she was. It's just, she was too young for the position she was given. It just didn't work, and nothing about the book really worked. Next up is The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. I've never really gotten on with N.K. Jemison's work, even though I've got pretty much everything she's published to date. I've never really gotten on with it, so put that on the pyre. Next up would be The Women's War by Jenna Glass. This came out a few years ago. It's the first book, and then I'm not entirely sure how many books in the series it is. I don't think it was particularly all that successful. And what I read of it, no. And finally, Amber Low by Lara Elena Donnelly. This is the first book in a trilogy of, it's not exactly, it's like a non-magical fantasy. And the first part kind of had promise, but then the later part just completely fell apart. And I really didn't like it at all. I think maybe if the book had just focused on the cabaret aspects, it would have been more successful, but it had to get into a political spy thriller, and that just failed completely. So, to the pyre with this too. Which is kind of appropriate because the cover's got some flames. But anyway. So, that was the book sacrifice tag. I'd been wanting to do this tag for a while, so I could kind of vent on my science fiction and fantasy collection, because I haven't really had my relationship with science fiction fantasy has declined this past year, and really over the past 2.5 years. But yeah, so maybe ought to have some discussion videos next week, where I sort of take stock about my science fiction fantasy collection, because I do make some hard decisions about that. But anyway, if there are any books that you would like to vent about or rant about, do consider doing this tag. It was quite fun to vent about these books. So anyway, BookTube, that's all I've got for today. I will be back tomorrow with another tag video. So till then, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.